So thanks for letting me interview you on your own podcast, guys. But
Yeah,
for my listeners, this is Pheaney, or as we talked about, I also go by Peter from the On the Road podcast, and really excited to chat with Cory and Brian just about a topic I'm really diving into. We were talking right before we hit record about connecting with the idea at a recent summit in Chicago of the idea about hubs. And I know you guys have, I feel like you've led the way in some of that, but just want to kind of hear some of those stories and about that. But maybe for my listeners, give us a 1 minute intro of yourselves, and hopefully that'll touch on the KC Underground as well when you do that. But yeah, Cory, you want to go first?
Sweet, man. Brian and I were looking at each other like who's going first. So
we were doing the deep.
I got you.
Yeah, we were in the same room looking at each other. And we were just telling Pheaney, it looks like a really official podcast room.
Because it is.
But it's a closet that has some like sound poofy. What are these things called? Just
sound poofies.
Sound poofies. Some disciple maker friends of ours put in the background years ago. So don't be intimidated by how official our podcast room looks. It's actually not. Yeah, my name's Cory. We're both here in Kansas City. 6 years ago, launched Kansas City Underground, just essentially a local missions network that's like, hey, what if we go all in our city to see movement and to see everyday people making disciples in their spaces. But then there's like a really robust network and, kind of what words that we now call hubs. Basically, what if there's an entire missions org, but that's like local, that is there to really support everyday people? And what does that look like? So yeah, man, I could go more into that. I've got 3 kids, been married for almost 20 years.
He's so old.
Getting into disciple making movement stuff. Honestly, I read church planting movements in college in like 2006. And I've been trying to experiment with a lot of that since. And there's some fruit and 98% learning experiences. That's what we'll call it.
That's
Brian?
good.
My name is Brian, and as Peter, Pheaney, Jason said,
Jason's not one of them. Just so
we're like 2.5 minutes in, which is about the point where good content starts on our podcast. We're just running this podcast on our podcast as well, because why not?
Free content.
Pretty much everything Cory said, part of the Underground since 2019 when we launched. Just exploring what does it mean to see that decentralized movement emerge in KC. We long to be a disciple-making movement like what we see in the global South, majority world. We've been learning a lot. And pretty much every day is like, that works, that doesn't work. How do we adjust to that? Married to Kristen for almost 22 years and have 5 kids.
So old.
Yeah, I'm older.
I want to jump on the decentralized thing. Short intro for your listeners, since we're just going to duplicate this. I live in the middle of Illinois. I went to school in Kansas City, though. So we decided we're not going to talk about too much Kansas City stuff like barbecue and the Chiefs. But
we can talk about barbecue.
We just got exposed to movement thinking. Probably now getting not quite a decade, 7-8 years ago. And most of it is more figuring it out than actual finding answers. But it's fun to just kind of keep asking questions and seeing. So that's really how I run podcast interviews now. There was a little more purpose originally, and now it's like, hey, I've got a question, so I'll just ask it on a podcast. But I want to jump on the decentralized thing. I was thinking about this yesterday, because I think when movements are great, and we actually, our minds will think purely decentralized, right? Like from like one guy leads one person to faith, and he leads 2 persons to faith, and it's just a beautiful like mess, and nothing, there's no structure to it. But the reality is, I think there is structure in some of those crazy movements of God in the global South. But there's also, I feel like, a need on this side of the pond that, I love how you guys use the phrase everyday disciple makers. Like they need something like to support them on this journey that's really a weird one, depending. Like they might step out of their local church and all of a sudden it's like, oh, wait, did you just quit Christianity? There's so many things we could go into there, but that's kind of where I wanted to start is, and maybe it's how you guys got there. You already knew it intuitively at the beginning, but again, we want to see just crazy multiplication, totally decentralized, but conceptually, we actually do need a little bit around it. And I think that's kind of the basis under the hubs that I would love for you to describe later. But yeah, any thoughts or Am I kind of thinking the right way when I bring that up?
Yeah, totally. I think Genesis of KC Underground is really God bringing together people who have a similar heart in the city, and really similar yet really different. So I was in the movement world forever, and just I'd been a lot in the local county jails. That's where we'd seen fruit. Tried to mobilize a lot of Christians in the churches that I was in, and not seeing a ton of fruit. Getting frustrated with that, and being like, this morning I was reading one of the many times that Paul is like, I'm done with you guys. I'm going to the Gentiles. And like, there was a flavor of that, probably not as holy or pure in my spirit of like, all right, I got to go. I got to have our own stories. And so I had kind of taken that leap a little bit and started to see some fruit from the harvest. Brian, Rob, some of our original team, they had a lot of influence in a large church on the west side of our city. And real heart to see everyday people plant the gospel within a lot of neighborhoods was really you guys focused early on, right? It was
early on,
simple church stuff. And so live in the rhythms of mission to see new disciples that make churches. And so God kind of brought together, and a lot of them, they were influenced by movements also. Rob was in India. So it was this idea, like God kind of brought together these streams, and we were like, okay, let's launch something. Like we're kind of forced out the nest. We don't need to go in that whole thing, but like maybe I'll leave that part to you, Brian. Like the next step of like we're looking to launch something that had an identity, so that people had something to kind of hang their hat on.
Yeah,
if that makes sense. Like we're leaving this other thing. Now we got to do this thing, and that's kind of how we operate in the West. We don't have those natural tribes, so it's like we needed that thing that rallied us together.
You want me to say more?
Yeah. Brian, what do you think?
Yeah, I absolutely think that you need structure. On this podcast, our podcast, frequently lately, we keep saying, "Oh, I didn't watch The Chosen forever, now I am." And I just watched this episode the other night.
This is like the third time you've referenced Chosen in the last few weeks. So
I know, but it's like the stuff keeps like it's like the Lord held me back from watching it for this moment, for such a time as this. Anyway, Peter is talking to Jesus, and he's like, I think we need some structure. I think you should put me in charge. That's essentially what he's saying. And the character, Jesus in the episode goes, there will be a moment we need structure, but not now. And I just had this like feeling of, yeah, that's always the tension that you ride, is to insert it when you need it. And so pretty early on, we have all these little phrases that help us remember our DNA, and what we're committed to, why we function the way that we function. And one of them that we started with very early on is don't build what you don't need. You don't need a extended spiritual family microchurch first. It emerges as you make new disciples. You need a commitment to disciple making first. Don't go try to build the structure and the rhythms of family. Like, let that happen as you build family. But eventually you need structure in a microchurch because you need some predictable rhythms for people. And the same is true for a network. Early on, you don't need a ton of structure. You need to create an identity and DNA that eventually emerges to the point where you go, okay, we need like a team that has some capacity and some time to equip and coach people and probably convene them in different rhythms. It probably is helpful at some point to go, yeah, we're not a weird, strange cult. Like, we love Jesus.
We're weird and strange.
Here's what we believe about Jesus and why we believe that about him. And it's helpful to give people something to attach to. Because like Cory said, we don't have these natural tribes in the West so much. And those things are important to introduce at some point so people understand, yes, we are committed to citywide gospel flourishing. That's what we're about. And then that will inform what we do going forward.
Yeah. I love that. I mean, I've heard the same phrase of don't organize it until you have it to organize, right? And I love actually, though, that you tied that a step earlier, or maybe multiple steps earlier than the idea of like a hub or a network, is like actually that's from the ground up, right? Like we don't organize a church if we haven't even started sharing the gospel with lost people. It's kind of what I heard there. So
can I ask a question, Pheaney?
Yeah, go for it.
Like it'll spark some of this. Is like Brian's messing with me. Sorry, he said to distract me, and I'm calling him out. This is for you. This is for Brian. This is for listeners. I always like to start at this point when we're talking about hubs with practitioners. It's like, what do you guys think are the maybe 2 or 3 biggest obstacles that Western context, and maybe specifically American Western context, faces to see legit disciple-making movements? Like, and then these are maybe obvious, maybe not, but what do you guys think? What would be your immediate answer?
Do you want to go first?
Sorry. Back to you, Brian. I can share. And just jumping actually off of a good friend of mine, Roger Scholl, wrote Movements in America, but free shout out to him. But just, I've seen it, felt it, and I feel like he kind of codified like the you could say social isolation or the lack of natural social networks is a huge barrier to multiplication, regardless of receptivity. And that's also, maybe that might be barrier 2. I think there's a unique, we're in the same probably religious context in the Midwest of like, there you can have a lot of Christians, but that actually itself becomes a barrier to receptivity. So, but I would actually put that as less as just like the actual barrier to movement, the gospel. A friend of ours, Roy, said this in a workshop I was in, the gospel spreading generationally, right? Planting the seeds of the gospel that will spread generationally. The biggest barrier there I see is just the lack of social connections. But love Brian's thoughts.
Yeah, I think you're really hitting on that idea again of early on lack of tribal identity, individualism. The other 2 that I would really hit that I probably have some conviction around is like a fundamental deficit in missional. I'm reading.
Like, how are you knowing the exact words? Like, I'm looking at a slide that I put together, and I was like, "That's hilarious." I was like, "How are we this in sync?" No, he's reading my slides.
Cory has a PowerPoint presentation, and I have access to it, so I was just reading it.
Solid, man.
The 2, though, I would agree, though, would be a fundamental deficit in missional prayer and dependency on God. That's been something that I'm in a new context working, following in the footsteps of Cory, working in a state prison, different than the jail he was in. And lately, like in our conversations, that's one of the things that's come up is like, how do we return to desperate prayer for movement in this place? Like, let's stop worrying about the strategy. Like, we don't have to focus on that right now. Let's just get desperate in prayer that God would move. And then I'm not going to word it the same way as Cory did, but I would say maybe like the ocean that we swim in, the paradigm that we have of the church in the West. It's hard to overstate how much people import that paradigm into anything new that they do. And so when you have 1,700 years of Constantinian imagination, that's how our friend Alan Hirsch puts it. Mm-hmm. It's like when you've been formed in a way, you've already been discipled in a way of church that brings so many assumptions, that has domesticated the people of God, that it's, well, I'll give you a real practical example. I was working with a church yesterday. They're in a different state, and they said, we feel stuck and we need some coaching. And we have a weekend expression and we have micro churches, and we don't feel like we see movement. And on this call, the whole time they kept referring to Pastor blank, right? And they kept saying, well, Pastor so-and-so says, and I'm like, well, that's part of your problem. I couldn't say it yet, but it's like you're seeing this person at the top, and he makes the decisions. And your current church imagination is preventing, like they were basically saying, we're not sure why our people won't take up like the call to go and do this in their context and see like movement spread rapidly in all these different contexts. And it's like, well, all these people are looking at this one person that you've given a title to that is setting vision and direction. They won't take that up as long as the imagination of church they have is referencing this person at the top. You could go into all of the other things around that, but like that is a significant barrier to the people of God being set free in the wild to go do what they've been called to do.
Yeah. I asked that question, not to hijack the convo, but when the question of why hubs goes back really to that question: what's halting or slowing down movement? And yeah, every time I get in a room with practitioners in the West, they all say the answer that you guys just said first: some form of individualism, isolation, lack of tribal identity. And this goes for both believers and disciple makers that we're trying to mobilize, as well as the people that we're trying to reach. And I just have, this is the thing I've been harping on a ton in the last few months. Individualism is so much more detrimental to every phase of disciple making and movement that we don't even realize it. And we're so in it. We're formed by it. We don't even realize how much that has affected every part of the journey. So for us, we're like, okay, part number one, how do we like help a group of people do this and have a level of, my favorite word from ESPN, stick-to-itiveness? Like how do people endure long enough? Because the reality is most of the time, because either we don't have those networks or just a lot of times believers have to be mobilized to even start to engage with people who don't know Jesus, that most of the time it takes time. That groups don't immediately get started, right? So we're like, okay, let's galvanize, let's get some people together. We need to start something. That's like my other phrase I say. Start something, like start something, have an identity that comes around it. And so although there is some, and maybe we'll go into this in a little bit, Pheaney, but it's like, yes, there is a timeline where we need to see, a group of people mobilize and making disciples. And then over time, we start a thing. But sometimes that thing comes early on. It just like depends strategically of how you're trying to get people. But for us, we feel like if we needed people to say, okay, if I'm going to leave what I'm doing, or at least leave it enough so that I've got time to actually engage with people who don't know Jesus in the harvest. If I'm going to do some of that, then I need other people to do this with. And it's more than what I think the language of teams, other things that we've tried to do in the movement world, they just haven't been robust enough, I guess is what I'm trying to say. There hasn't been a robust enough identity. I put a hat on, it says, the name of this team. There's something to that, which is so ironic because we spend so much time going away, like, unpacking and getting away from like all of the paradigms in our brain about like logos and institutions, because movement's not based on that. And that's all very true. And then we find ourselves totally isolated and lonely without a home or without a network. And like, so that's just helped us kind of live in that world. So that was a lot of rambling, but that's kind of the genesis of what a hub is.
That's good. So we've thrown out the term bunch. I had the benefit of sitting through a workshop. Like, give us I don't know how long, but kind of give us a quick snapshot of like when we throw out the term hub, what does that actually mean in the Kansas City Underground?
Actually, that is a really short answer. Good. But I can talk for a long time and make it longer if you want.
Give us the short one and then we'll unpack it.
Yeah. So the definition is a catalytic team that exists to equip, coach, and convene a network of disciple makers.
Great.
Yeah. Whether that's geographical or affinity based. That's like the tagline on the end, though. It's really a catalytic team that exists to equip, coach, and convene a network of disciple makers.
Yeah, and I love the image on, maybe it was a live map. I don't know. You guys would know on the KC Underground site of I can't even remember how many hubs it is now, but both geographic, but also affinity based, like you were talking about, prison, that are people just finding that and then connect to it, or they're already connected to the underground and be like, hey, here's your tribe within the bigger tribe. I'd just be curious how that kind of works itself out practically.
Yeah,
it's probably better to unpack the definition a little bit first before
go for it.
Answer that. So here's why all the words matter. Like we don't just throw definitions for no reason. The idea is to flip the institutional paradigm of going back to, do what Alan does, church as we know it, like that. There's a person at the top that's like dictating vision and setting the course. To flip it and to think more movementally, like with that exponential curve, is essential to have teams that are working with everyday disciple makers and considering, what do you need?
Mm-hmm.
Like your head is down in your context and your aim is to make disciples, but occasionally or often, depending on the context, you need coaching and equipping around your own flourishing, your own soul flourishing, which is really important. Like we don't want to just be the people that are like, go, 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 and you don't abide with Jesus. And people forget about that. You have these expectations, again, the Western context, produce, perform, create. And we forget that like we first abide and Jesus does the fruit bearing through us. And when you get in a more what we would say apostolic movement that is driving forward, you need people that call you back and go, how are you and Jesus doing? Let's start there. Because if you don't flourish in your own soul, it won't spill over into mission. But then you face barriers in disciple making. Like I keep hitting this wall because of the context that I'm in. I can't get people to, it's not about getting people to do anything, but sometimes that's the issue. It's like, hey, it sounds like you're trying to force all your people to meet Jesus your way. Have you considered slowing down and listening to their story and discovering what would be good news for them? And we have all kinds of tools and resources to help disciple makers, microchurches overcome those barriers. And we equip in that, but there's a difference in equipping and coaching. Equipping is usually, I want to show you how to use this tool. And then coaching becomes how do we do that in real life as you go? And so the convening piece that I talked about earlier, I'm kind of jumping ahead of myself without saying some things. We would say hubs have these three essential functions of equip, coach, and convene. Convening happens as you equip, as you coach, and sometimes just in inspirational ways, like, hey, let's get disciple makers together and just tell some stories. Like you need to know other people are doing this and you're not alone. Sometimes you need to get them together to lament. Hey, things fell apart. Let's just be sad together and invite Jesus to be with us in it. But going back to that space, catalytic teams. So catalytic teams, they're thinking, how do we help new people start new works? And how do we keep doing that? How do the new things that started, how do we help them catalyze new things from them? So beginning to think generationally there. Catalytic teams that exist to equip, coach, convene. So I already mentioned those. Disciple makers, microchurches in a geographic area. So also these teams, we try to build around, we do build around fivefold. So Ephesians 4, apostles, prophets, evangelists, shepherds, teachers. We would say every hub team needs at least 3 that would embody those gifts, but we would love 5. They might have 6 or 7. So they function to support each other to go like, as we look at the group of disciple makers, we're coaching, equipping, and convening. Where does the prophetic show up? How do we shepherd well? How do we teach and create new tools? How do we encourage toward that evangelistic heartbeat, new people that don't yet know Jesus? The apostle shows up, helping break down those walls, start new things. So we form teams around the fivefold, and then they're just thinking, how do we catalyze new works? But we want them to be as hyper-local as possible. So even affinity-based is hyper-local because it will lean into a specific story. Yeah. So 0 Hour that works with high school students. Geographically, they're not hyper-local in the sense that they work in high schools all around our city, but they're hyper-local toward the story of what does it look like for high school students to be equipped as good disciple makers and microchurch leaders. So that's kind of unpacking the definition.
Yeah, I would jump in on this. Yeah, kind of to your question of like how does it get started? How do you recruit people? Do they get connected to other hubs? The answer is like yes to all of those. Like we don't have big front doors. Like it's really hard in some ways to get plugged into our network, and that's a funny way of saying that, because if there people are looking for it, like, hey, I'm looking for that church service, I'm looking for that good speaker, that great worship environment. Like honestly, we don't provide a lot of that. We help plug people into teams. Even people who are looking to, hey, I want to get connected to a microchurch. We actually kind of suck at that too. Like there are some places in the city that we can plug people in, but most of our churches are merging out of context that they have a reason to be there. So just like plugging someone else who wants to be a part of a microchurch into this network is just artificial. So we're not good at that either. But what we are decent at is coming alongside people that have a little bit of an itch, and we're going to train you how to reach your people. We're going to try to get you in the best rhythms as possible. So I'm not a very smart man. All right.
That's not true. He's very smart.
But I am practical, and I'm thinking, okay, yes, on one hand, movements are, find the one who can reach the many, very organic, start from small mustard seeds that grow. On the other hand, also, it's like, hey, if I want to reach a whole city, instead of just trying to start one fire, I want to start as many fires as possible. I want to have as many of those seeds planted in many spaces. So I'm like just very like, this may sound not spiritual enough, but I'm always thinking about recruiting. Like, and that's a funny way of, maybe that word throws people off, but inviting people to the cause on multiple levels is such a huge piece of building city momentum. And then after you have a little momentum, more and more people are able to jump on that, and because there's a culture. So I always think of it like, if I'm recruiting, I'm going to think of it in three ways. I'm thinking persons of peace from the harvest, like that we're recruiting, we're finding people who don't yet know Jesus and who can open up networks, spaces in the city. The second one is I'm always recruiting ordinary believers who are disciple makers. Who are the people that are a little outside the box? Maybe they're a little like holy dissatisfaction with their church experience, or maybe they're just new followers of Jesus that are actually excited. Maybe they're evangelistic, whatever it is. We're looking for people, ordinary disciple makers that we can mobilize. And then lastly, I'm always looking for, this is a phrase I stole from Phil Alessi, leaders of peace. Other like leaders in our city who are leaning into movement-like concepts. Maybe they're already outside the box. Maybe they're already looking to plant the gospel and do church, which is different than what they've experienced, whatever it is. And then you just begin friendships and relationships with people and invite in conversations. And over time, those actually become the beginnings of like some hubs that can get started because they've got influence over people. They might be in a specific network or affinity. So for us as hubs have emerged, it's been a combination of just the momentum, right? Things that start things in our city, and then finding leaders of peace in certain sections. And then like DNA is big. Like we're even wrestling through now, like all the different hubs doing the different things. We need to really drill down on what our DNA is. But that, that's a big part of forming hubs and getting people plugged into.
I'm going to answer the question in a really short way. Hubs form when new disciple making starts taking off in an area and new microchurches start forming. And then we go, oh, there's like 4 or 5 leaders that have been really a part of forming this in this geographic area or among this affinity. Do you guys want to be trained to lead the rest of the people out in this area? Cool. New hub formed. All those people are now attached to that hub. The second way that they form is sometimes people are like, no, that's really it. They're just moving into an area, new disciple making happens, and then they form. How do people attach? They were either attached as it was emerging and we built what we needed, or people come to the underground and go, I live over in this area and I want to do all of this in my context, in my neighborhood, in my workplace. Who's coaching me? And we go, oh, you're in Waldo. You should connect with the Serve Hub. So those are the two ways that they form,
or even from the harvest. So we've got some stories of people who came to Jesus and now they realize they're part of something bigger, and so they're training. They get plugged into a hub more from the ground up than just relationally connected.
But the same way as if people just raised their hand and said, "I need to be coached." It's like this is who does it for you.
That's great. That's great. Okay, so this is 101 how not to run a podcast. You're supposed to ask your guests how long you want to go beforehand, especially when we're cross-publishing. So I could go a couple smaller wrap-up questions, but one thing Cory said made me want to ask a different question. So, but I do want to honor everybody's time and for the episode.
We're good, man.
Yeah.
All right.
We're here for you.
Whatevs.
You guys got locked in the closet.
Podcast.
Yeah.
I might have to turn the air up in this closet. Outside of that, we're good, man. Just keep it rolling.
Okay, so I wanted to jump on. This is not necessarily a hub conversation. Maybe it is. How does maybe I'll just ask, how do you? But then I would apply it to anybody. I love it. Hyper local versus macro city, right? Like we actually need both to not just be like, oh well, yeah, we really want to see the gospel take root in this high school. Well, that's awesome. Like we need an everyday disciple maker, probably a few of them, to own a high school. But if it never gets beyond that, we're obviously not going to reach a city, an area. So I don't know if you guys have probably thought about that a lot, but when you said that, I was like, oh, you can recruit people actually probably easier hyper locally, unless they're already what you talked about, the leaders, leaders of peace that are apostolic thinkers. So just whatever you guys want to wrestle or help me understand how you guys think through that, like macro to micro is how I've used it. Would love to jump in there.
We both have thoughts. I think this.
He thinks he's going to go first.
I think I'm going to go first. Because in a sense, it always has to start with the macro.
I thought you were going to say it always has to start with me.
It always starts with me. No, the opposite. It starts with that movement, phrase or acronym, WIG-TAKE. What's it going to take to reach an entire city? That, in a sense, always has to be the starting point for a movement-minded group of people. We got to reach everything. In that, though, you have to be hyper-local. Because for the average disciple maker, they're not thinking macro to reach an entire city. That's why you got to have apostolic leaders to ask that question, right? And so we talk about the fivefold. We already said we need to have leadership teams that operate in these gifts, and they're equipping everyday people. But that in itself is what we've in the past called just an apostolic structure, where there are people who are thinking we got to reach this whole city. We got to mobilize people in every place, in every way, and everywhere. But our disciples that we're mobilizing, they have a reason to be in certain places or certain networks. And honestly, they need to think multiplication, but they don't need to think about how they can reach every single network in the city. They need to do where God's called them to do. So it starts with big, but then on the ground with an ordinary person. And I will just say, we have done kind of a sucky job in movement context because we expect everyone to think like a citywide catalyst, and they don't need to. And most people are not wired that way. Let them join Jesus where they're at in the ground level. So it starts with big, but it's got to be mobilized in the small.
I want to hear from Brian, but I think most people also don't have the capacity to think maybe, but for sure act on a citywide, right? We don't have that. So anyway, Brian, go ahead.
Yeah, that's why we already have 10, 11 hubs in the city, because we're saying you shouldn't have to drive far to connect with a leader that's coaching you. They should know your context as well. And I get it. We're on Zoom. We can coach across geographies, but the distinction is if I'm being coached by someone on the Missouri side of Kansas City, they don't know my context. If I'm coaching someone over there, I don't know their context. And I don't mean that we have our cities vastly different. There are places where culturally it's very different. And we know those places. What I more mean is I know the rhythms of life for the people on the hub team that I'm connected to. It's not just that I know this context, it's that I live in it. I know it's little stuff, but it's this stuff really matters. These streets are closed right now because repairs going on. That's a part of my life. I got to go a different way and see a different part of my city. I'm
really sorry about that.
I'm making that up. It's not.
That's why you were both late, probably, right?
Yeah. But I know who's running for city council. I know when the home games are for the high school that's 1.8 miles from my house. You know what I mean? I know all of that stuff about the people that I'm directly coaching. And somebody on the other side of the city knows it about their part of the city. And so you need this constant multiplication of people becoming hyper-local so that they know all of the cultural rhythms of that place and they're coaching toward those things. Or if it's affinity based, all of the things that matter for that affinity, what forms them, what shapes them. But to go back to the higher level, I know I keep pulling in Alan, but that idea, because it's been influencing me lately, Christology pushes us toward missiology, pushes us toward ecclesiology. We have to own that Jesus is Lord and he sends us in a particular way, but then that goes deep into an area. Everyone should own that Christology high level. It doesn't mean they have to think strategy about how we do missiology in all these places. But it's when I own that together, like I think we do expect everybody in our city to be committed to citywide gospel flourishing. There is an expectation to own that DNA, but not to feel the need to strategize around it.
Yeah, that's good.
And so the high level Christology leads to missiology, leads to churches forming, disciples made. Everybody gets to own that at a macro level too. Jesus has sent me into my particular place. And if I don't own that, who will? And when everybody does that in every context, that's when the gospel flourishing takes root and multiplication becomes at least potentially realized.
Yeah, that's good.
That's super good. So I only have one more question, but the question after mine will be just, hey, what else needs to get asked or shared like on this concept? But the question I would have is like, just could you guys speak to somebody that's hearing this and like, oh yeah, that's exactly what my city needs, or it's exactly what I wish I had. Wish I was like able to just call up Cory, meet him for barbecue, and just get plugged into something that's already pre-existing. What would you tell somebody that's just like that early stage? They're in that, they need to have the stick-to-itiveness that Cory referenced, but they don't know that next step to get to even a local team, let alone get into Hub's kind of mentality. Just kind of speak to that very beginning and how would you encourage a disciple maker in that space?
Yeah, are you speaking particularly about people in Kansas City, or maybe just anyone listening anywhere?
I'm asking anybody listening. Feel free to. I definitely want at some point. I was going to say, hey, how can we connect with Kansas City Underground? So if this is where to drop that, go for it.
No, I mean, part of how I was hearing that is like if there's an ordinary person in Kansas City, but I don't think that's what I don't know. If
he's saying like if you have somebody in Greenville, South Carolina, that's going like, oh, this is awesome. Like, what do I do first?
Yeah, so we're trying to like, and we're all about coming alongside other cities and other people thinking this way. Our primary focus is Kansas City. And so we have to have like proof of concept to be able to try to teach or lead in any concept, any way with people. That being said, we have kind of a timeline that we work with when we think about how hubs emerge.
You gonna share your screen?
No, I'm just going to say there's like 5 bullet points. And we've kind of gone through it, but it answers a little bit to the question of like, first, like we need to see a catalytic team that's committed to multiplication, to movement, to reaching an entire city. Like that's like step 1 in a city. And so a lot of even like DMM trainings or mobilizing missional Christians, like that exists in so many cities in the country. And so now we're years into a lot of experiments, and people, what we have found are there's more and more, I don't want to say frustration, but probably some of that, or just like, okay, we keep getting stuck in the same places. So we will come alongside and help leaders think about that. Like how do we move from just being this team to something more? Oh yeah. If you're watching this podcast, the screen is being shared. So that's the catalytic team. We have a better timeline somewhere that looks prettier, great. But this was my Canva attempt. So after a catalytic team is in a city, we start to say, okay, now we actually need to start thinking as a catalytic team, you're wearing kind of 2 hats. You're simultaneously engaging the harvest in spaces that make sense for you to be there. Maybe you're a catalyst. So like you're going into prison, Brian, you don't have a reason to be there. Or the reality is we also need to be practitioners, and that might be more like our personal networks. In movement, it seems like we're always training people to be catalysts. In the States, we're like, we actually might start start thinking about these people being disciple makers. Like we're not just catalyzing things. We also have to have we're in it too. We're in the game. So you got to be thinking about, I'm a practitioner, but I'm also a mobilizer. I'm finding other believers who might be interested in the same way, and we start to figure out ways to hang out and overlap. Number 3, if over time, as we see that, we're not just a catalytic team anymore. Now we're a catalytic team that is starting to get some just ordinary disciple makers. We're starting to see fruit, and the fruit that emerges is not just in one context, but it might be multiple contexts, multiple neighborhoods, multiple relational networks, because we're now starting lots of little fires. So as you start to have 2, 3, 4, 5 stories starting to emerge, right? Number 4 on the timeline, it's just the funniest way of saying this. The need to support an emerging network becomes apparent. That's my way of saying, crap, there's a bunch of, how do we help this thing thrive? Like this is where I think Western attempts at movement have really struggled. because we have not answered enough of the questions. We have not helped provide enough of the analogy we use a lot is a trellis. We haven't provided enough structure early on to help see these plants start to grow. And over time, it'll go beyond it. But especially early on in such a fragile relational world that we live in the West, or truly organic things are just a lot of weeds. Like, we've got to cultivate it in a more intentional, robust way. And that's hubs. And number 5, okay, now it's beyond just the need. Now it's like, okay, we're going to start this thing. It's going to have a name. We're going to have rhythms. We're going to have practices. We're going to identify how do we equip, coach, and convene disciple makers. And that's when we start to see this identity really formed. For us, Kansas City Underground, like the first hub was Kansas City Underground. We didn't have this language. We were doing this, but we didn't have this language. Over time, as new leaders of peace or things emerged throughout the city, we helped them form more robust identities. But that to me is like, what if you're looking in another city to get rolling in this, that's a really natural timeline. Do you have a catalytic team that's trained in movement thinking and multiplication? Are you starting to both recruit and engage, and then over time starting to create a local ecosystem that has more of an identity?
I would not add too much else to this because I have been discipled in Cory's way. But it's going to sound a bit obtuse probably, but I think it's worth saying when Cory made this beautiful graphic on Canva.
If you can't see it, I mean, just like tears are going to come to your eyes whenever you.
Probably it'll be a holy moment. I think there's like 0.5 or something on the timeline that's like, let's go make disciples and stop worrying about this. So it goes back to don't build what you don't need, because like in my experience, I do a lot of calls with other leaders that are like, hey, we want to do this in our city. Yeah. And they're either have been in the predominant model, coming from it, whatever, but they don't have like the experience of doing the incarnational work in a network. They've equated disciple making with conversion. They haven't invited people to live with them. I don't mean like maybe physically in their house, but in the sense of like, come follow me as I follow Jesus. And they've taught them in such a way that they knew how to go do it. So again, if you look at the timeline, it's actually baked into the at least phase 2, where it's like you're seeing early fruit. But I think before you get that catalytic team, it's like, just don't worry about this timeline. Just go do some stuff. Go be with Jesus, invite people into your life, follow in his rhythms and his ways, and make disciples, because that's what actually forms the early team usually. Now, there may be other people that are already bought in that you have these conversations with, and you can dream about that. But don't build what you don't need. Don't get excited about the end product. Like, again, we do a lot of coaching with people that are trying to do number 4. Like, oh, we got a need to form this, and we're going to start forming. And it's like, just go back there. And I don't mean that like you're not here yet, you can't be with us. It's just like, just slow down.
That's exactly right. I mean, this is an assumption that in the city.
He doesn't say that much, so
that's really good, because it's a lot of it's your starting point. Who are you mobilizing? So like Brian actually he talks to a lot of church leaders that are like, how do we do what you're doing? And Brian's like, just deconstruct, just make disciples for the love of God. Like, and then, a lot of times I'm in different DMM circles, different pockets. And I'm like, don't be afraid to build something.
Right.
Because we're so allergic to things that don't seem organic. And I can't 3 or 4 years ago, sitting with a catalytic leader who lives in Kansas City, but he's an Indian guy who helps oversee networks and thousands of churches and disciples that are making disciples in India. And he is like passionate about this. He lives like across the street from me, dude. He's an amazing guy. And he's just like, everyone thinks that movements are organic. It's like, no, they're not. Like, there's organic parts of it, totally. But it's like, there is so much on the back end. And I would just say, like, America, don't be afraid of creating some back end structure. Just don't start with it and don't make it the thing. And be ready to surrender every logo that comes up and be ready to like put it in the background, which Brian knows. like I don't want to put logos on anything. I don't want to brand stuff until it's needed.
Mm-hmm.
And then sometimes it's like, if it'll galvanize a group of people, then don't be afraid of it.
Yeah.
And then don't just think that the teams that we're creating that are just going to naturally equip and coach and convene, naturally do the work that disciples need to feel like have that stick-to-itiveness. I mean, I don't know a lot, but I've done this long enough to know that ain't going to happen. Like, so there has got to be a group of people that are committed to reach an entire city, that are saying, all right, we're going to help create those structures so that ordinary, everyday disciple makers can continue to thrive, both in their spirit, spiritually, personal pursuit of Jesus, healthy abiding practices, all that stuff, which we've overlooked so much in the movement world, and also strategic disciple making coaching. It's not going to happen naturally and organically. There's an intentionality that has to be built.
That's good. Yeah, I just was thinking of just the biblical principles under this you could glean from the story in Acts 11. So I'll share it quick, where the disciples, the everyday disciples, we know from the context that were scattered in association with Stephen being martyred, end up in Antioch. And then the Jerusalem church hears about this work of God, and they're like, one of you said it earlier, what's going on? Like, we got to figure out, and then they send Barnabas, and Barnabas encourages them like crazy, but then he realizes like, oh, he actually needs somebody else to help, right? So he goes and finds Saul at the time. And I think that's, I know that is actually a very like local church that we're talking about there. Probably we could maybe argue in my church network of small churches in the city, but there's structure that comes eventually. Then in Acts 13, there's a group of leaders that are praying, but it came out of Jerusalem going, wait, who did what, where? Like, from what we can tell, Peter hadn't even met Cornelius yet, potentially. And they're just like, oh, we're just sharing the gospel with people. So I love that story as kind of some principles underneath all that you guys have shared.
Yeah.
And then lastly, if there are people who want to, if there are like people listening to this, it's like, dude, that's us. I'm ready for this. This is ringing true. We do a couple times a year, Brian, have you been doing a hub cohort where we're trying to help train teams to think through this hyper locally? So it's not just like, hey, take all of our stuff and underground and, here's our language, but try to help people really super contextualize it. And we've had many iterations of it, trying to like,
there's a new one that's
hone
so
it.
much better.
Good. Yeah. Just try to hone it. And like, so there is opportunity, Brian. Is there a way to reach out to or check that out?
Yeah. I don't know if you post like, hey, here was stuff we talked about in the podcast on your podcast.
I'll definitely drop show notes and some links. So but tell us as well. Tell us the best way to connect.
Well, I'll shoot you the link for the Hub Primer.
Okay.
And the Hub Primer is basically, hey, here are our convictions around the Hub.
Yep.
And I'll add one last word in here that keeps coming back to mind is like, Hub teams have to ride the tension constantly of the organized and the organic, or the formal and the informal. And so it's not just formal everything, and then out here is all informal. And it's not just, or whatever, all organized, all organic. It's like Hub teams have to ride that balance of like, hey, I hadn't seen people in a while. Let's just get together, pop-up party, do that, but also have predictable rhythms and patterns so people know where to connect. And it's the other image that was coming to mind as Cory was talking again is that trellis language. Jesus always uses, farming organic language because of the context, but like, I know many city people haven't planted things necessarily, but like when you plant the tomato plant, you don't jam the trellis in the beginning. Mm-hmm. You insert it when it really starts beginning to produce fruit and you want to hold it up. Mm-hmm. You can go ahead and put it in, but I think people that really grow things are like, why though? It's like, let's put it in when we need it.
To that analogy, we also got to say, if you don't have the trellis, the tomato plant falls on the ground, there's a little fruit, it gets spoiled, right? So I think both sides of that analogy are helpful.
Exactly. The fruit rots. But anyway, the Hub Primer is a document that just walks through like, hey, here's why we think this way. Here are our convictions around it. Here's a good timeline. If you don't have 3 to 5 microchurches, like the early fruit, you don't actually need this. But if you have that and you're like, oh, what do we do? There's a little link to a type form that's like, click here, fill it out. We'll invite you into the next hub cohort. The next one will run in, I don't know when this is coming out, but the next one for us will run in January. We're usually like a January and August kind of thing. It's 12 weeks. It's high investment for a team, but it really is like, here's the skeleton.
Mm-hmm.
We don't put the skin on it for you because every hub team looks different. In our city, they look different. So it's going to look different. We're just saying, here's the bones of it. And then you get to put the muscle and the flesh on it from there. That's it.
Great
stuff.
That's good. All right. So for my listeners, I really encourage you to check out any of these things from the KC Underground. Love following along with your guys' stuff. And if you put this promo for myself on there, if you're listening from the KC Underground and you just want to hear me interview guys like this, but in different contexts, it's usually just what's in my head. So I can't promise any very linear pathway at this present moment, but this is a question I have related to this aspect of pursuing the multiplication of disciples and churches. Might be a good listen. So appreciate you guys giving me time.
How would they find you, Pheaney?
I just find out there. No, on the road. On the road to No Place Left. Originally, it was very centered around kind of the No Place Left network, and still have lots of connections there. So that's the name that'll get you there in any podcast app. But then lately, again, a lot of the stories and the interviews are just like, hey, what's working? What are you learning? These types of just conversations like this, but in different contexts, if that would help any of your listeners. So
yeah, and for any of your listeners, you can find me and Cory randomly spouting off things at the KC Underground Podcast, the most creative name you have ever heard.
Yeah, there you go.
Well, it came out of a closet, so that's good.
Yeah. And we've got these poofy things.
Soundproofers. That's good. Man, this has been awesome, guys. Thanks a lot.
Sorry, that one got me. It was good to be with you, man.
All right, brother.
Later.
Talk to you later.